Thank you for joining us for this last edition of the fall season of the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. If this is your first time for joining us, thank you very much. And if you don't know already, you can go to voiceofjobseekers.com. You can also leave a comment there on the speak button on the right-hand side. You can also give me a call at 708-365-9822, which is also a number you can text comments to the show, suggestions, anything, any tip that you've heard on the show that you've experienced that did work, didn't work, or maybe you can't stand the show at all. You just want to express your opinion. That's fine too. I would also like to invite you to join in and subscribe with so many others to the newsletter that I send bi-monthly. You can just go to voiceofjobseekers.com to the top of the page in blue and leave your name and email address there. You'll get a copy of my ebook, 320 Modern Job Search Tips for 2020. Which thousands have signed up for already. Just want to present this last show for the season. I know I shorted you shows. Part of it was not by design, but some of it had to be. I don't know what to explain. I got really busy, so things happened, and I really couldn't swing two other shows this season. So, and there's one guest that didn't work out. That's a whole nother story, but they'll be on in the spring, hopefully. So we'll look forward to that. Today's show is about being the ideal candidate. Well, it's based partly off of the theme is based partly off of Kevin P. Davenport's book, The Ideal Candidate. But I also threw in a nice little bonus, and I hope you like it. And if you're a career coach or a career consultant or a resume writer, you may have a tip that might be 1.5 to 3 minutes long. You can also participate as well. Austin's going to be the first. He's going to give us some tips on how to get next to the best person that could be the best advocate for you in your job search. And yes, it's under the guise of networking, so you can look forward to that as well. But that's going to be first. But then after that, I'm going to have a talk with Kevin. And what's unique about this is that we do this person to person at the Chicago Urban League, where he works as a program manager for the School of Entrepreneurship there, as a program the Urban League has for entrepreneurs who are either startups or who are I think is not particularly startups at the beginning, but I think they're $50,000 and above. And he's a program manager for that. But he does work with a lot of job seekers as well in his business as the ideal candidate. He presents a lot to the 16 to 24-year-old. And if you go to his Instagram, you go to his Facebook page, you'll see tons of pictures and things like that. I want you to enjoy this interview, and if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, or you can email me, or you can text me, like I said. Look forward to bringing you on, I believe it's January the 14th is the date where we're going to have the new set of shows, and we're going to have a panel on that show. It's also going to be available on video as well. I know I promised that. I have videos from the past I haven't posted yet, but I think over the holiday that's definitely going to happen. And you can look for it on the YouTube page, and you can just go to my page and click the YouTube icon after January 1st, and it will be there. In the interim, I want you to, again, love your feedback. Would love for you to come back and if it's the first time, subscribe to the show. And hopefully you'll enjoy the show today. In the meantime, you have a great holiday, and I'll see you on January 14th in 2020.
Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Belsack, and I'm the founder of CultivatedCulture.com, where I teach people how to land jobs they love without applying online. Mark was kind enough to ask me to share my 2 best tips on exactly how to do that, so here they are. Tip number 1, When you are networking and reaching out, instead of focusing on recruiters and folks in HR, shift your time and your energy to connecting with somebody who may be your manager if you got hired, or somebody who may be sitting at the desk next to you. Why? Because those people can not only refer you in and get you an interview, but they can also advocate for you throughout the hiring process, and they can be in the room where the final hiring decision is made, singing your praises. That is such a huge advantage when it comes to landing the job. Number two is leveraging what I call a value validation project. That is a deliverable that allows you to show that you've done your research on the company, you know why they're hiring for this position, and you can pitch yourself in your own words using your own language through a medium of your choosing to illustrate exactly why you're the best fit for the role. A lot of people say to me, hey, I know I can do this role if somebody would just give me a chance, if I could show my worth. The Value Validation Project is your opportunity to do that. Thanks so much for listening to my tips and for listening to the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. To learn more about me and my services, you can go to cultivatedculture.com, or you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via my email at austin@cultivatedculture.com. Thanks for listening, and I'm wishing you a ton of success in your job search.
We're doing this live here, not streaming live, but we're doing it in person. I'm here at the Chicago Urban League today, and my guest is Kevin Davenport. Yeah, he's the founder and president of the Ideal Candidate Not-for-Profit, author of the Ideal Candidate book, and program manager for the Center of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Chicago Urban League. How you doing, sir?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Now, tell you a little story that I hadn't told you yet. We were on WVON 1690 back in the spring. That's how we kind of connected. And we were connected by my very, very longtime friend, James Parker. Shout out to him. And I kept my eyes on you. And being that James was really saying, you need to get to know this guy, I said, okay, all right. So I check him out. But that's how we crossed paths. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I think that I was going to mention was I got a call 5:30 that day to be on the show.
Oh, wow.
5:30 that morning. He actually texted me saying, you have time? I said, okay. But it was good to have you to be the backup there. But nevertheless, actually, I was the backup. But we're here live in the center, and I'm really loving it. It's a big conference room. And, for nerds like me, there are plugs everywhere, so everybody can plug the laptops in. And a big whiteboard. It's really cool, but I love it here. Tell my people about what you do before we get into discussing the book.
Sure. So, once again, founder and president of the Ideal Candidate. That is a program that focuses on soft skill, financial literacy, and corporate integration for 16 to 24-year-olds on the south and west side of Chicago. And I'm also, like I said, the program manager at the Chicago Urban League. And more specific, I'm the established business program manager. So actually, JP, shout out to JP as well. He's the, our startup coach, and I help any business grow and scale their business, usually if they're seeing about $50,000 or more in revenue, to kind of grow and scale, focus on procurement strategies, your MBE, DBE, WBE certifications. And so, by day I'm helping youth, and by night I'm helping small businesses grow and scale their business.
Right, but really you probably spend more time with the older adults than you do the younger ones these days.
In the Chicago Urban League role, absolutely.
Now, your book, you're telling me, is much more universal than it started out to be.
Correct. We started off, we had the subtitle as, a 16 to 24-year-old's guideline to dominating life after high school. And we got so much feedback from individuals that were over 25 that have read the book, and they were like, Kevin, we didn't really feel that intelligent because we learned something from reading your book, and I'm well over 24. So,
right.
And then I got some more feedback from another individual, and they're like, wow, this would really help out people, veterans in restorative justice. You really should consider taking the 24 off, because this book can really help a lot more people than just that small, niche. So we kind of pivoted from that point, and we're actually about to launch a new cover with a different subtitle, just so it'll be more appealing and open to other readers.
Right, and I, I think it's more important to realize that when you start bracketing people as far as strategies and job search, I think there's a lot of people who would say that 16 and 24-year-olds, if we really look at what they do, and I have one in my house, no less. Actually, my other one's, he's grown, gone, but I have one at my house, and there's a big difference in the way that they look at the job search.
Absolutely.
So just because they're a couple of years different, they just look at it a lot differently. It was interesting because my youngest is 23. And he was recently looking for a job, and he went and came across this company called Waterloo. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're completely virtual. There is no office or anything. They don't do, it's not even necessary to have a resume.
Oh, wow.
And the interview process for them is like a series of questions, and there's some vetting involved, and they do like a little background test. But then they'll say, show up to this job Monday morning.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. I mean, just think, even from the time that you were coming up, the job search was much more. There are much more layers than now. So, but you got to prepare for both, because not everybody's on the same ship.
And I just saw one of the organizations we work with is using this software where they do all video interviews as well. And the video is so intense that it will look at your facial expressions, how many times you said and ah, and it'll calculate that and give you basically a score, and then communicate that to the future employer. So things are certainly changing.
Yeah, they certainly are. And one should expect to prepare for different parts of the interview process, because a lot of times if you are meeting in person, more than likely it's kind of an antiquated approach. They're going to have it combined as a hybrid. They may have this first meeting either by a phone call or for you to do an assessment.
Right.
And then maybe the second part, you will talk to a person, or maybe another assessment. All that before you actually even meet someone. Exactly. And many times it's not even just meeting someone, you're having a panel interview.
And that's different, right?
And that is even different. So the amount of preparation it's going to take is several layers. That's pretty much what you're seeing, right?
100%. And that's kind of I think the biggest thing now, we've kind of pivoted to bringing your best self forward, because that's the bottom line. No matter what the style of interview, it's still, you have to bring your best self forward and sell yourself in a certain manner. So that's really the basis of how we kind of teach and how to highlight yourself in that way.
Yeah, or even now, bring your best self always.
Always, exactly.
Because every single part of the interview process counts. Even when you get the call to set up, if you're a lousy person, it's likely that they're going to continue that even after they set up a time and say, you know what, we came across a snag. They won't tell you that it's your personality, which is a whole nother discussion.
Right.
But really, you've got to bring your best self always.
Always. I even tell my students, it's like the interview starts even when you check in with the secretary.
Yes.
They're watching, they're paying attention, they will communicate back with the employer. This person was just on Facebook the whole time, or they were sitting there looking at their resumes, they were preparing,
right.
You are on the second you walk in that door, for an in-person interview.
Yep, and you're waiting, and it matters what you're doing during that time while you're waiting.
Absolutely.
I read an article just recently, or this was actually a LinkedIn thread, where the company bought the candidates in, and they had them come in at, I believe it was 7 o'clock, and they made them wait the whole day. No kidding. This was a LinkedIn thread.
Wow.
and the candidates were there until the ones that were left that were there.
Right.
And he interviewed, and there was only 2 left out of the ones that came in at 6:00 in the evening. Wow. I mean, it's abusive. That's abuse. That's abusive. But there are no rules to say you can't do it. That doesn't mean you should. But, there's, the thinking of employers is just very interesting. And you can speak to this as well because you train entrepreneurs. I don't know if you ever talk to them about their interview process.
Of course, yeah.
But have you ever heard of anything so egregious?
Never. And that's what I was going to ask. Did the 2 at least get hired? The 2 that stuck around?
I think he hired those 2 that stuck around.
They did get hired. Okay, that's at least good news, but that is
it
really
is.
abusive. And
but but that's to say that that it's so different for everybody now.
Exactly.
About how nobody's training the interviewers, nobody's training the hiring managers. Or the few that are, we're probably not going to hear about because they understand that process. But I was just talking to someone on a Facebook group that I was a part of, where we discussed how there was an article in Forbes where the process generally is broken. Is that something you see?
What do you mean by the process is broken?
Well, the hiring process from a candidate's experience. From, everybody's kind of, it's sort of like it's bad enough when the people being interviewed are not prepared.
Right.
But then you get the people who are doing the interviewing are not prepared either.
And they've never had training, and they usually haven't done the interviewing before, and they're making mistakes. Yeah, that
sure. But of course they're going to appear right because they got the money and they got the job. But then again, does that really set them up for the whole workplace experience that the employer offers?
Exactly. And I think that's actually a good point. I think the interview process is a good indicator of what to expect, the company culture, the communication style that you'll have with your employer. I think all of that you can tell, during the interview process. So I even tell my students, it is a commitment on you as well. You want something to put on your resume. You want that experience to be connected to where you want to go in the future. And so, it's your time, and your time is valuable. So interview the interviewers as well. You're interviewing for that position just as much as they're interviewing you to hire you. So, really think about, be confident in your value, go into the meeting, that interview with that confidence, but also, be on the other side of like, I really want this opportunity. I really want to grow, but is this really the organization for me, or are my skills best at another, location?
That's interesting. You should say that because I want you to kind of give, maybe 1 or 2 tips of what are you kind of coaching, let's say the average young 24-year-old that's coming in, they have a little experience. They may not have the full plate of education that would be ideal. But what are the 1 or 2 things that you see that you seem to focus in and emphasize the most these days?
So we do things a little different at the Ideal Candidate.
Okay, all right, so, that's fine, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, so we do things a little different, and so our biggest focus is really on the student psychology and how they see themselves. We call it behavior modification.
Okay.
But like I said, it's just heavily focused on what is your purpose in life? How are you making other lives better? What are your strengths? We also go even push them to identify their weaknesses, and then we do the little drills to turn their weaknesses into strengths.
Okay.
But with that, we say, now that you've identified your purpose, where you want to go, does this new position align with where you want to be?
How do you help them find their strengths? Do you have them do an assessment? Do you have them do
we have different drills. I don't want to give away my secret sauce here.
All right.
Yeah, during the but during the portion, we have different drills and workshops that bring that out. And once we've kind of identified that, or they've identified it on their own,
right?
Then they feel a lot more confident. Like, okay, this job opportunity clearly isn't aligned with where I wanted to go, even though it might be a nice salary. I see this, these other 3 opportunities over here are much better fit, and I can grow within the company, and it makes more sense for me long term than just going after a check. So that's really where we push this, the students of like, hey, what is in alignment with you long term, and that's going to be the best result in the short term.
Instead of just looking for a job.
Exactly. We're not just looking for a check. How can you grow and really expand your own skill set and along with getting a check while you're getting this first opportunity?
Yeah. How do people respond to that kind of approach?
I mean, the students love it. And like I said, I think it's because no one really talks about it that way. Everyone really is just like, you have to do this and you have to do. I feel like when people talk about the interview process, it's so strict, it's so rigid. And, like I said, times are changing, things are different. And I think people appreciate you considering their own, feelings and their own vision for themselves and to help them kind of add clarity, because I feel like 16 to 24-year-old is a confusing time. You don't really know what you want to do, and you're kind of all over the place. So to have someone kind of give you that structure from internal perspective, outside of just once again get a check, I feel like they the students really appreciate that when we do those workshops.
You said something earlier that is really key, is that you're also interviewing the interviewer.
Correct.
Which is a major ordeal even for older adults, because a lot of people, they wait till they get into a desperation mode to start looking for a job. Then it comes down to, I'll just take anything. I'm going like, no, you don't. You don't want to just take anything. It's sort of like you just don't want any girlfriend. You just don't want a boyfriend or any spouse. You want the right one. Because that relationship has just as much of a staple in your life than the ones you have outside of work.
100%.
Yeah, that becomes very dangerous. I think, are you still, what are entrepreneurs saying about people who are doing startup? What are they saying about hiring staff? Is there anything that stands out to you that seems to be a common analogy, whether it's a complaint or how different the world is or something that they don't expect?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen, like, consistent, and especially 16 to 24-year-olds, but I mean, I think it's consistent all across the board, but they're looking to hire talent and train skill. So that's why I say, again, your biggest skill set is yourself. Showing your leadership abilities, your teamwork abilities, your ability to learn quickly and to grow within that organization quickly. Because the biggest question I get, once again, I focus on 16 and 24. It's like, Mr. Davenport, I have no experience. And it's like, well, that's fine. They're not expecting you to come in. It's an entry-level position. So they will train you, but you need to be trainable. You need to be coachable. They need to see, because even every hire is an investment. So they need to see that you would grow and, within that organization.
So how do you differentiate? And I mean, there's a theory difference between talent and skill.
Correct.
And of course, there's one thing to train skill. That's something the employer can do. But training the talent for them to show talent, what do you think are some key elements that are involved for someone to really showcase talent?
Absolutely. So effective communication skills is 100% key. Yeah. And, going back the leadership and coachability too, because you have to be able to step up, be autonomous at times, but you also need to be a team player and understand when those two roles, need to be done, because it can't be done at the same time. And, you can't just focus on one lane so you need that mix. And really, I think, once again, that effective communication, and I would say a third, matching the company's culture is also key. So,
very interesting.
From a dress for success point to even the communication style, things are different when you work for IBM as opposed to Google. Yes. From the way they dress to how they communicate, their functions and processes, it's going to be different depending on the company you work for. So, those are the three that I would say.
Yeah, you've got to look the part and exude the wanted culture that they want. You've got to be what they want before you are what they need.
Mirror the culture.
Yeah, you are the culture. That's just excellent. Coming to a close a little bit, in your final estimation, what does 2020 bring as far as you can see for those who are going to be looking at the job search aspect of it? And it doesn't have to be necessarily 1624, but as your experience speaks, what do you see?
I see a lot more tech companies, which means there's going to be a lot more going into, like, as far as the interview process, that video interviewing and going through the different layers of video interviews before you get to an in-person.
Right.
I'm seeing a lot more with these different video interview platforms. And like I said, they literally, if you stutter, if you pause for too long, if you look away from the camera, if it judges everything. And it'll literally give the video back to the employer and tell them at 34 seconds, they said, at 36 seconds, and so it'll literally break down line by line. And so that it's becoming much more easy for the employer to identify, good candidates, and it's allowing them to save time during that process as well. So my biggest tip would be to really practice your interviewing skills. Get really, really good at answering those tough questions, like what is your greatest weakness, and like I said, practice that as much as possible, and do one or two of those rounds before you start the interviewing process, because I think that's where a lot of people are going wrong, by not doing their due diligence and being prepared for these interviews. And like I said, especially if it's going to be virtual, you're going to have a different type of polish. You don't have the same ability to connect on a human level. So how do you connect with just looking at a laptop? It's a different feeling. It's a different, way to project yourself. And, so I would practice that, be prepared for that. But I think it's a lot more that in 2020 is going towards this video interviewing.
And I think even in extension of that, to get used to the technology, whatever the company's using. And that's got to be, and you mentioned it in your book, do your research.
Exactly.
Do your research and find out what people are using, because there are people using text now to set up interviews and to even get those first assessment questions out of the way. So, if you're not used to texting, or you're not used to talking to a company in text, it's not going to be the same way you talk to your friends.
That's correct.
Yes. So get used to that. Kevin Davenport, the ideal candidate, author of that book. Where can people find that book?
Amazon.com. You can type in the ideal candidates and it'll pop right up. And I would be grateful, so grateful for the support.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin Davenport, for being on the show. And we'll get to talk a few minutes afterward. But thank you all for listening. And we're coming to the last shows of the year. We'll be publishing on January 12th again. So if you have any questions about the podcast or the blog, go to voiceofjobseekers.com. Meantime, we're done. Thanks. See you next week.